Mr. Speaker, I want to try first to set the scene of the government's current financial situation and the state of the economy, as well as the government's priorities in the coming financial year. Then I will outline government's revenue measures and policies and the allocations made to our various government ministries. Mr. Speaker, the people of Fiji gave their verdict on 14 December 2022. Our people voted for change. People voted for freedom after an era of unnecessary and sometimes brutal control and suppression of their opinions. They wanted their voices to be heard. They wanted to be involved in the running of their country and to have a say in what the government should do for them. They wanted the government to be more accountable and the leaders to treat them with respect. After all, Mr. Speaker, everyone in this House is paid for by the taxpayers. We are here to serve the people of Fiji. We are not here to rule over them. Our people, Mr. Speaker, want a democracy that exists not on paper but in practice. They want respect for human rights, media freedom, rule of law, and good governance. They want water in their taps and better health facilities. They want better roads, undisrupted electricity, and improved transportation. They want the children to get better education, affordable housing, and improvement in living standards. They want better paid jobs. The coalition government also wants this for them. And Mr. Speaker, there are just a few of the many reasons why people voted for change. And this has led to the People's Coalition Government, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, led by the Honourable Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka, the People's Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as part of that change, let me start with how the national budget process will change. I promised a few days ago that we would deliver the budget on time. This is not a small point. We know that in past years there have been delays, sometimes for hours in the delivery of the budget. Whether from disorganization or indecision, I do not know. But this was disrespectful, not just of the members of this House, but to all the people of Fiji. It was the same disrespect reflected in a government which made decisions at whim and without consultation, which rammed almost all its legislation through this House under urgency provisions and without proper consultation, and which insulted and threatened those with differing views. And this is the first thing that has changed. Last month, the Honourable Prime Minister's remark to the people of a village in Vanuatu was quoted in media, where he thanked the previous government for the work it had done in national development. He pointed out that national development was now the responsibility of his government. He said, and I quote, "After us, there will be another team. We all play a role and we should hear each other out and help out in whatever way we can," unquote. Mr. Speaker, this is respectful and gracious leadership. This is leadership that respects what our predecessors have done and which understands that governments other than ours will hold power one day. And I hope that we on our side, now that we are in power, can remember that, as the Honourable Prime Minister said, we all have a role to play. Mr. Speaker, everyone expects me today to talk about economics. Let me remind everyone of the old maxim, well understood by good scientists, good environmentalists, and good economists, that everything is connected to everything else. We cannot progress until we have rebuilt trust and unity. We must rebuild an environment in which people are encouraged to speak out, to complain, to suggest alternative approaches, to draw our attention to the things that matter to them. We must rebuild confidence in our business and productive sectors that we will respond to their needs, not just lecture them about what we think they are doing wrong. Mr. Speaker, we want to do this with humility, with an openness to criticism and a willingness to listen. We know that in the term of this government, things will go wrong. We will make mistakes. We will not hide from them. We will not pretend that we are perfect. We trust the people to understand that not everything will go well. But this is part of rebuilding trust and confidence and public participation in government and good leadership must be at the core of every government. Mr. Speaker, we want the change to be reflected in the budget process. After I complete this address, the House adjourns until Monday, 10th July for the budget debate. And I want to advise the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and his team that in the coming week, Ministry of Finance officials will make themselves available to meet the opposition parliamentarians if they wish, to clarify any aspects of the budget and to give them any information they require. Mr. Speaker, this is because we want the opposition to be informed and to contribute constructively to the budget debate. We respect the opposition as representatives of the people, just as we are. But now, Mr. Speaker, let us face a few uncomfortable facts. We are a 6-month-old government with a mandate to deliver change. What we have walked into is a deeply grim state of affairs. We have a national economy that is on the mend again after COVID. The Macroeconomic Committee is predicting an 8% growth for the 2023 calendar year, mainly on the back of better than expected tourism receipts. Before we engage in too much congratulation on this, we should remember that this is merely a return to the state of our pre-COVID economy. This is catch-up growth to get us back to where we started in 2019. The real challenges for economic growth start now because let us face another uncomfortable fact. In the last 10 years, despite all the boasting and big talk about booms and never before this and unprecedented before that, our average economic growth has been little more than 3% per annum. And that is, Mr. Speaker, not enough to significantly improve lives and incomes in our country. We must do better than this. And let me remind everyone, Mr. Speaker, that the COVID pandemic was not the underlying cause of all our problems. COVID certainly made them worse. But this has been a decade of missed opportunities. Poor revenue and spending decisions for years, including during the COVID crisis, have undermined the government finances and now left the government deeply in debt. National infrastructure has been ignored with highly visible consequences. Our government has been left, Mr. Speaker, scrambling to fix infrastructure problems for which no money has been budgeted. Because for years there's been no money for maintenance. In the last decade, we spent over 600 million on the TEL scheme, but that was supposed to be a revolving fund of repaid money to support the next generation of students so that we can continue to provide them the support. It was not being repaid because they could not find jobs or paid low wages and salaries, and there was a mismatch in workforce needs and what our students were getting qualifications for. It remains a mystery to us how $120 million has been spent on the Walesi National Digital Platform. And we now have to find out where this ridiculous amount of money went. And my colleague, Honourable Deputy Prime Minister Manuakam Kamida, has this family in his sights. Mr. Speaker, we inherited a public debt of close to $10 billion, almost the size of our entire economy. In the upcoming financial year, Mr. Speaker, we must find a staggering $1 billion to service this debt. That is about $536 million to service this debt. We need $536 million for interest payment and another $516 million for principal payments alone. In other words, $1 out of every 4 in this budget, Mr. Speaker, must now be spent on servicing government debt. During my one-on-one consultations with the budget with coalition cabinet ministers, who I also want to commend for their considerate understanding, this was the same starting point of the discussions about the plans for the new budget year. Our ability to spend on capital works, maintenance, upgrades, and incentivize our precious human capital that we are losing daily is crowded out by denial and debt. Mr. Speaker, we inherited a national health system on the verge of collapse. In the last few days, we've learned that the new Navua hospital, built 10 years ago, on which completion was never properly certified, cannot keep the power and water going. It will need an overhaul which will cost more than 10 million. But this is just one example of the crisis we face in almost all our health facilities. The CWM hospital still has no laundry years after a fire there. Lubuka Hospital's mortuary was finally not working. Most of our hospitals are in shocking physical condition. The toilets are not working. There are long queues of people waiting for hours in need for urgent health care. Medical equipment is not working. Essential drugs and medicines are not available on time. We lack 800 nurses. Doctors and other exhausted health professionals are treated poorly, not listened to when they offer solutions. And Mr. Speaker, this is the consequence of years of serious neglect of health infrastructure and services. Mr. Speaker, we inherited a disaster in the water sector. Thousands of households still struggle with daily water disruptions. Half the water that we collect and treat for people to use it is lost because it leaks through an aged pipe network. We will need hundreds of millions of dollars to fix it. How did we get into this mess? Because for more than 10 years, two-man government did not raise or save enough money due to prudent financial management. But those two men still wanted to spend. They were focused on the TV cameras and the political goodies. They did not want to hear bad news and kept it hidden if it arrived. They threatened and intimidated people who wanted to bring problems to the attention of the public. And yet neither of these two men are now in this House to account for their actions. For all that, Mr. Speaker, we now look to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and his team. We want to work with them on finding solutions to our problem. We must first, however, understand why we are in this difficult position and learn lessons for the future. Some people will accuse me of talking only about the past, but Mr. Speaker, this is not the past. This is our present. As a doctor once told me, 90% of our patients' diagnosis is his or her history, because it is now that we must find the money to fix these problems. It is now that we must find the money to meet our debt servicing payments. Our present and future choices are now restricted by those poor decisions of the past. Mr. Speaker, these are problems that have accumulated over 15 years. Many of them will need time to fix. And for that, we will have to ask our people for patience and goodwill. Let me now talk about how we are going to deal with these challenges. Mr. Speaker, nations are not built by politicians and leaders making grand speeches and opening new buildings. They are built by people on the foundations of unity and mutual cooperation. Most nation builders work quietly out of the limelight. They serve their communities as good employers, as public servants, who work long hours as provincial and district councillors, in charities and religious organizations, NGOs, in pro bono professional work. These are the people we must empower. These are the nation builders who we as a government must serve. Mr. Speaker, this government values our people, their ideas and their aspirations. We believe in consultation and dialogue. So, Mr. Speaker, the first necessary step we took in government was to bring the people together to hear their ideas and concerns after 16 years in which they had not been heard. We had a very successful National Economic Summit where key stakeholders, including private sector, trade unions, academia, civil society organizations, women's groups, youth organizations, development partners, and the general public participated in a free, open dialogue process which will help to shape national priorities for inclusive and sustainable development. The 14-member Fiscal Review Committee was appointed and conducted their own consultations and deliberations with public servants, economic experts, and other people. In a short 9-week span, they produced a comprehensive report with over 100 recommendations to reset our fiscal priorities towards sustainability, stability, and resiliency. I take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to thank the Chairman, Mr. Richard Naidu, and 13 other sterling members for their service to this nation. The outcomes of both the Economic Summit, the Fiscal Review Committee, and the Education Summit and other plans from which the outcomes will contribute towards the framing of our umbrella national development plan. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to thank the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, the Asian Development Bank, and all our development partners that provided clear and honest views and recommendations during the government's transition process. It was those moments where it dawned on us just how right we were when we used to ask the hard questions about money when we sat on the other side. Mr. Speaker said the news media plays a crucial role in this entire dialogue process. One of our first acts in government was to repeal the repressive Media Industry Development Act that has plagued the media industry and kept the people in the dark. We want people to express themselves freely. We want to hear their concerns. Mr. Speaker said we have moved quickly to rebuild confidence and trust between the public service and the government. As the Honourable Prime Minister said on Wednesday night, permanent appointments in the civil service have been reinstated, and the retirement age has been moved from 55 to 60 years, providing civil servants with the employment security they need to do their work. That work is to provide honest, independent advice to the ministers without the fear, as they used to say, of being sent home. Mr. Speaker, in our first few weeks in government, we redeployed $100 million to support our families and other urgent priorities, including a $200 back-to-school payment for children from low-income households. We provided additional funding to continue the 10% reduction in bus fares until the end of July 2023. We did this mainly to give the assurance to our people that even with the new government, they would continue to be supported through challenging times. We have begun to rebuild trust with our leading university, the University of the South Pacific. Once again, Mr. Speaker, let us pause to reflect on how backward and petty Fiji looked only 6 months ago. It was involved in a pointless fight with the USP. It had held back more than $80 million in committed funds, money that Fiji's own students needed for their education. It had deported USP's Vice-Chancellor all because some people did not like him. No government should abuse its power over public funds in that way. And so, even though funds are tight, we have begun the process of paying USP what we owe. We are the government, Mr. Speaker. We represent the people of Fiji. We must be seen to be trustworthy and ready to keep our promises even to people with whom we disagree. And just as important, Mr. Speaker, is the initiative that the Honourable Prime Minister has begun to rebuild relationship between Fiji and other countries in the region. We were nearly destroyed by the arrogance and disrespect of our previous leaders. We must regain the trust of our neighbours. Our very existence depends on us, all working together to solve the critical problems posed by climate change and environmental degradation. Fiji used to be seen as a leader which could bring the region together. This is the position to which Fiji must return. We provided additional funding to the Fiji Road Authority for urgent roadworks. We supported other quick infrastructure upgrades, including some of our health facilities. We successfully held Girimit Day commemoration and celebrated Ratu Sukuna Day, thus reaffirming the unique rights and places of people from our major ethnic groups. These were powerful events which have set us on a path of national reconciliation. They demonstrate that as a government we embrace our cultural, ethnic and religious diversity. We are not afraid of it, we do not ignore or suppress it, we celebrate it. We take strength from it. We know that we can build unity from it. And that is where, as a government, we must begin the task of rebuilding. As I said, Mr. Speaker, everything is connected to everything else. Today, Mr. Speaker, we unveil our plans with clear strategies and financial commitments for the next fiscal year. I have already talked about rebuilding, and this is a vision. This is our vision, rebuilding our future together. And that, Mr. Speaker, is really the theme of this budget. And it is my honour and privilege to present the first national budget of the People's Coalition Government. This budget is an outcome of the numerous consultations, dialogue we've had with a diverse group of stakeholders all across Fiji. We've talked to various industry groups, private sector businesses, entrepreneurs. We've heard from our youth, our women, our elderly, and the vulnerable. We've met trade unions, civil society groups, and other grassroots organizations. We've listened to many experts locally, internationally. We've worked with our development partners, multilateral agencies and lenders. We've had long hours with civil servants, including ministers and permanent secretaries over the last 2 months, including long and tough negotiations. I also extend my deepest appreciation to the Permanent Secretary and Ministry of Finance staff who have worked tirelessly. And I suspect with some relief, Mr. Speaker, that these days they are not on call at random hours of the night, and that many of them can have some semblance of quality time with their families because we put this budget together in a more organized way. After almost a decade, Mr. Speaker said, we reconvened the Cabinet Subcommittee on Budget chaired by the Honourable Prime Minister and comprising the 3 Deputy Prime Ministers. The Cabinet Subcommittee on Budget, Mr. Speaker, oversaw the overall formulation and finalization of the national budget. And I take this opportunity to thank the Honourable Prime Minister for his leadership and the support and the camaraderie of my 2 fellow Deputy Prime Ministers. This is consultative government, Mr. Speaker, not 1 or 2-man government. Those days are over. Mr. Speaker, even with the major challenges the government faces, the budget is set against the backdrop of a renewed sense of optimism and confidence. As I have said, our economy is recovering faster than we had expected and is now projected to grow by around 8% this year. And given the trends we are seeing, Mr. Speaker, growth may be even higher. Not everything is ideal. High interest rates threaten the global economy. This also puts pressure on us and the interest we may have to pay on our loans from offshore. It may also put pressure on our exchange rates, making imports more expensive. The economies of Australia and New Zealand show signs of slowing, so we will review our projections later this year when we have more concrete statistics available with us. Mr. Speaker, the tourism industry has been doing extremely well with a strong rebound in visitor arrivals, which will return to pre-pandemic levels or even exceed. Yields in the tourism industry are increasing as our tourists are spending much more than before and staying slightly longer. But we know that we cannot depend on tourism alone. We've all learned a bitter lesson in the last 3 years. Mr. Speaker, investment levels are picking up with a pipeline of major projects that are getting off the ground. The banks have informed us that demand for credit is increasing, and we know of some major projects that will soon materialize. Our foreign exchange levels remain strong, standing over $3.4 billion as of yesterday, equivalent to almost 6.1 months of retained imports. The exchange rate is stable and well protected. Our financial sector is sound with a strong capital position. Liquidity levels are more than adequate to support investments, sitting at almost $2.5 billion. Remittances crossed the $1 billion mark last year and are increasing further, likely to cross the $1.2 billion mark by the end of this year. Mr. Speaker, it is not only fitting at this juncture to extend the coalition government's deepest gratitude, Vinakavakalevu and Dhanyavad to all our families and friends abroad who continue to support our people here in such a moving and a heartfelt way. On the fiscal front, the budget stabilizes our revenue and debt levels and puts them on a sustainable path. We began the fiscal year in July 2022 with a debt to GDP ratio of 88.8%. We are projecting this to reduce to 79.3% of GDP by July 24. But the bad news is that this ratio is still too high. We have too much government debt for the size of our economy. As I have said, nearly 25% of the budget this year will go to servicing debt. And debt remains one of our biggest challenges. We must continue to carefully manage our revenue spending. In this budget, Mr. Speaker, our total expenditure is $4.3 billion. With the projected revenue of $3.7 billion, our fiscal deficit is set at $639 million, equivalent to 4.8% of GDP. This is a major reduction in the deficit. In the last 4 fiscal years, the average deficit has been 9%. This deficit, Mr. Speaker, is higher than I would have expected personally. However, we are at a critical point. We must continue to cushion the blow on our people. We must catch up on all the lost years without investment in infrastructure and maintenance. If we do not do this, our future path of economic growth will be affected. And at the same time, we are pursuing further fiscal consolidation. That is better value spending and cost savings to ensure that we urgently bring down government debt parameters to a sustainable level. But to achieve this, we will have to swallow some bitter medicine now, otherwise we could end up in a worse financial situation. Mr. Speaker, every government has to collect taxes to fund public expenditure. It is a delicate task to ensure that we collect the right amount not overtax the economy and our people. But revenue adequacy is critical in the running of the government. It is equally important that in this process of collecting revenues, our tax system is simple, easy to administer, transparent, efficient, and equitable. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, we cannot deny the fact that for many years the government was bereft of vision to raise funds other than keep on borrowing until debt hit the roof. Popularism and electioneering were the only option. They cost the government and the nation billions of dollars in lost revenue, pushing debt to unsustainable levels. This also meant that the deterioration and lack of maintenance of government infrastructure and poor service delivery. The government simply did not have enough money to fix its assets and services. It is very clear from the World Bank Public Expenditure Review, various International Monetary Fund reports, from the report of the Fiscal Review Committee, and from the deliberations of the National Economic Summit and all the expert views, the government cannot continue to run with the current low levels of revenue generated through its low tax regime. And now we have a debt overload that we must urgently confront. Business as usual cannot continue. And from the feedback I have received, Mr. Speaker, our people understand that. They may not like it, but they understand the problem. Mr. Speaker, we need to put an end to this problem quickly and decisively. The time to act is now, and if we don't, we will be clearly on the path to fiscal disaster. We will only further weaken government's ability to perform core functions, including to fix our deep infrastructure challenges, including in water, health, road and bridges, and to protect our most vulnerable. We have tough choices. We fully understand the expectations of the people, particularly on the prices of food and basic items, but we will be making some tough decisions that were sidestepped in the past. We are here to make the right decisions for the nation. It is a choice between bearing the burden now or burdening our future generations with more debt. It is also about ensuring that our next generation get the health and education and the employment opportunities they need now. We have to invest in our future generations, our young people, now to ensure that they will be more productive in the future. It is our moment to put a down payment for them. Against this context, Mr. Speaker, let me now announce key revenue and tax measures. Effective from 1st August 2023, Mr. Speaker, we will only have 2 rates of VAT. The 21 items on zero VAT will continue. We have added prescribed medicines to the list to make it 22 items. So now the items on zero VAT will include flour, rice, sugar, canned fish, cooking oil, potato, onion, garlic, baby milk, powdered milk, liquid milk, dal, tea, salt, soap powder, toilet paper, sanitary pads, toothpaste, kerosene, cooking, and prescribed medicines. The supply of all other goods and services effective from 1st August 2023 will attract a VAT rate of 15%. Mr. Speaker, 15% VAT isn't new. It was payable on all goods and services between 2011 and 2015, except on 6 basic food items, it was 0. Therefore, 15% is not a new measure. As the Honourable Prime Minister said in his national address on Wednesday night, we have to bite the bullet. But in a few years, all of us will discover that it's a magic bullet that may give us short-term pain, but result in long-term gain. These measures will generate additional VAT collections estimated at $446 million for government. But this restructuring will make the VAT system simpler to administer, eliminate ambiguity, and improve VAT compliance while we generate additional revenue for public investment. We have chosen to ensure that the poor are protected with the continuation of the zero rating and various expenditure support measures. Mr. Speaker, the strongest feedback we've received is about lowering food prices. So to assist households on this, government will reduce fiscal duty from 32% to 15% on canned mackerel, except canned tuna, corn mutton, corned beef and beef products, canned tomatoes, prawns and duck meat. Fiscal duty on sheep and lamb meats will be reduced to 0. Beef meat, the duty is being reduced from 32 to 15%. Government will also reduce import excise on chicken portions such as wing, drumstick, legs, feet, thighs, etc. from 15% to 0%. The reduction of duties will provide ordinary households with a range of choices. I now turn to corporate tax, Mr. Speaker. We will increase the corporate tax rate from the current 20% to 25%. New companies eligible for reduced corporate tax for listing on the South Pacific Stock Exchange will have their tax rate increased from the current 10% to 15%. For clarity, this will be for new companies and only for a period of 7 years. These corporate tax rate increases will add about $73.5 million in revenue. We are encouraged by the feedback that we have had from the business sector, Mr. Speaker. Most businesses understand government's fiscal situation and they need to contribute more. In return, however, they want the government to improve the regulatory environment, business processes. I'll come back to them. At this point, Mr. Speaker, we are keeping an open mind on shareholders' income and whether we will in future implement an imputation system or a simpler tax on dividends. This is a matter on which we will be consulting widely before the next budget, before we make any decisions. Departure tax, Mr. Speaker, will increase from the current $100 to $125 effective from 1st August 2023 and will further increase by an additional $15 to $140 effective from 1st January 2024. This will add a total of $30 million towards our overall tax revenue. We are signalling these increases as early as we can so that the tourism industry can plan for them in the wholesaling and other commercial arrangements. Mr. Speaker, we are going to increase the excise tax on alcohol and tobacco by 5%, while the excise on carbonated sugar, sweetened beverages will increase from 35 cents per litre to 40 cents per litre. On alcohol taxes, these were reduced by 50% during COVID, while taxes on tobacco were kept unchanged. We are mindful that alcoholic beverages are an integral part of our tourism industry, so we are starting with a very small increase compared to the massive reduction we had 2 years ago. In efforts to curb NCDs and promote healthy living, a domestic excise of 40 cents per kilogram or per litre and import excise of 15% will be introduced on juice, including carbonated drinks, Frubo, Tempico, Pulpy, Just Juice and Marigold, ice cream, sweet biscuits, snacks and sugar confectionery. Motor vehicle import excise duty will increase on all new and used passenger vehicles by an additional 5%. Mr. Speaker, I intend to touch briefly now on a serious matter of good governance in connection with capital gains tax. In 2021, just a few weeks after the beginning of the 2021-2022 financial year, the previous government introduced a special measure, a special exemption on the 10% capital gains tax levied on the disposal of shares by shareholders before 1st May 2011. The government did this without explanation and of course under urgency as it did everything. However, that government also introduced an even more special measure. Any taxpayer who owed capital gains tax from a previous unexempted transaction but had not yet paid it was not exempted from paying the debt. The exemption did not work in the other direction. If you are a compliant taxpayer and you had paid the tax, you did not get it back. But if you are a taxpayer who owed the tax, because you had not paid it, you were suddenly exempted from payment. In opposition, we asked the same question that we ask now. Why? And for those and for whom was that special benefit and the special tax exemption? Mr. Speaker, that special law for certain special taxpayers, or should I say one taxpayer, was one of the most disgraceful and corrupt pieces of legislation ever to be brought before this House. It was a sign of just how self-serving the previous government had become and how poor our governance had become. A government that is making special laws for its chosen special people is a government that does not deserve to be in office. Mr. Speaker, this random change to the capital gains tax regime designed to help a specific set of special taxpayers ended up costing the government, till today, almost $70 million in lost revenue. We are now going to get this right and right this wrong and remove the exemption. Mr. Speaker, the social responsibility tax will be simplified by merging it with the PAYE structure, along with a 5 percentage point reduction on each band for those earning above $270,000 effective from 1st January 2024. This would mean, Mr. Speaker, say that our maximum marginal tax rate will be reduced from the current 44% down to 39%. Mr. Speaker, say government has been losing significant revenue from a range of tax and custom concessions that have been in place in Fiji for a very, very long time. Given the fiscal challenges facing us, we have reviewed these concessions and in some cases varied the rates. Custom Concession Code 236, which currently allows all manufacturers to access duty-free raw materials and other machinery equipment, will have a concession rate increase from 0 to 3%. Still a concession. Mr. Speaker, say, but government will get 3% duty from all these imports. Similarly, for Concession Code 231, which is available to manufacturers for import of packaging products, that concessionary rate will also be increased from 0 to 3%. Mr. Speaker, Code 235 allows hotels and resorts to import building materials, finishing, fittings, room amenities, kitchen and dining room equipment, utensils and outdoor equipment, all duty-free. We will increase the fiscal duty on this concession from 0 to 3%. Concession Code 117, which allows for a reduced duty of 10 cents per litre of fuel for hotels, manufacturers, cruise vessels and mining companies will be removed, and a normal rate of 20% per litre on diesel will apply. Concession on smartphones will be removed and replaced with a fiscal duty of 5%. Mr. Speaker, say we will completely remove the tax incentives available for warehouse development. This was introduced as a temporary incentive. It will also help reduce tax administration using this incentive, which we have noted in the last few years. We are also restructuring the ICT incentive to tighten the definition and eligibility criteria and align the maximum tax holiday period to 13 years in line with other incentives. Removing these few custom concessions will help us collect much needed revenue by around $35 million. Apart from tax raising measures, Mr. Speaker, say we are announcing a number of measures to improve tax administration and supporting the ease of doing business. Expenditures. Mr. Speaker, say over the years, the government has spent a lot of money building new infrastructure and assets with little focus on value for money and a lot of wastage. Worse, it has taken its focus off maintenance of our existing infrastructure. This is now suffering from years of neglect and has badly deteriorated. So we are now in a catch-up mode on maintenance. Public infrastructure assets, Mr. Speaker, say, we all know are the foundation of a country's economic development. And let me assure you that the highest priority of the coalition government for the next few national budget is going to be maintenance of this infrastructure. We have put aside over $200 million for maintenance of our hospitals, health centers, schools, public buildings, government quarters, roads and bridges and water infrastructure. But Mr. Speaker, say it is not just about throwing more money at every problem. We are completely changing our approach towards this. Our focus now will be on efficient and effective use of every single dollar. We are going to cut wastage and unnecessary spending by starting ourselves. And we will start this from the ministerial level to set an example. Apart from our 20% reduced pay, we are significantly cutting down on ministerial travel allowances that were put in place by the previous government. They amounted to actually, in some sense, looting taxpayer funds, ironically, by ministers who should be guarding them. Mr. Speaker, all coalition government ministers and all members on this side support these reductions, starting with the Honourable Prime Minister himself, who's taken the biggest cut. For the travel allowance of the Honourable Prime Minister, the current 250% per diem loading will be reduced to only 100%. Ministers will have their top-up reduced from 200% to only 50%. For assistant ministers, the top-up will be reduced from the current 100% to 25%. Apart from these major reductions, we will remove all the exorbitant incidental allowances that are currently provided while they are on travel duty. Improving water services. Mr. Speaker, say the poor maintenance and upgrade of our existing water infrastructure has resulted in 47% of treated water getting lost along the pipeline due to leakage. This has caused major intermittent water supplies across Fiji. However, in the last few months, Mr. Speaker, we have seen some major improvements. Water disruptions have been reduced, and we now have a good plan, not just for the next year, but also for the long term. The new Water Authority of Fiji board has hit the ground running with a clear mandate to get things done. Mr. Speaker, we are scaling up our investment in the water sector with an increased budget of $250.8 million. Yes, this year we will put $250 million into the water system. This is a major increase of almost $60 million compared to the current budget. And this includes $118.1 million in operating expenditure and $132.7 million for capital expenditure. Mr. Speaker, the Rewa River Water Project is expected to be completed by the end of July, with full commissioning expected by October this year. This has been a major investment, and we will see major improvement in supply after the full commissioning of the project. Mr. Speaker, we are allocating $51.2 million for the completion of the project. The total cost of the project is approximately $400 million. I thank our financing partners, the Asian Development Bank, the European Investment Bank, and the Green Climate Fund for the grant support towards the project. Mr. Speaker, $53.9 million is allocated to improve water resources and implement new disaster resilient infrastructure, including water treatment facilities with a focus on reducing leakages. $6.4 million to improve wastewater operations, and $4.8 million allocated for asset management within the Water Authority. Another $4.6 million is allocated, Mr. Speaker, for the digital transformation in the water sector, which will help manage water disruptions. A further $3.8 million is allocated for emergency response in the event of water disruption. We are allocating $7.9 million to focus on improving access to water supplies in rural areas, which has been neglected for some time as well. Mr. Speaker, given the magnitude of the challenge we have in the water sector, it is going to take time and cost over $500 million in replacement of the 40-year-old pipe system, which is leaking underground. We are working with the Asian Development Bank for a major institutional revamp of the Water Authority, including governance, investment planning, asset management, infrastructure replacement and upgrade, review of water tariffs, investment in our people, and improving customer services management. Mr. Speaker, the coalition government has, as promised, restored tripartite arrangement that we had for many years with the workers, and we will use this to ensure the rights of workers are respected through dialogue and consultation with government and employers. The previous government had deprived our workers of hundreds of millions in the FNPF contribution by reducing the contribution rate from 18% to 10%. We will restore the 18% effective from 1st January 2024. Mr. Speaker, government is the largest employer in the country, employing over 35,000 civil servants. As the largest employer, we are committed to looking after the welfare of our people. We are working together with the workers' representatives to review the overall pay and benefits of our civil servants. We know that this has not been done for almost 5 years, and our hardworking civil servants and our teachers, police, medical professionals have not received a pay rise for some time. In the next 6 to 9 months, we will holistically review the civil service remuneration, and pending the review, the salary structure of the civil service will be readjusted to commensurate with the work they do for the nation. Mr. Speaker, the coalition government will review the current minimum wage rate in the next financial year. We want our workers to receive a fair and just living wage through a proper consultative process. Social protection, aftercare fund, and government pensions. Mr. Speaker, it is the moral responsibility of any compassionate government to ensure that most vulnerable in our society, the poor, persons with disabilities, elderly, children, or other disadvantaged persons, are well supported by the state. We need well-equipped, responsive institutions and laws that ensure that our vulnerable are not left out. Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to building a responsive, inclusive, and well-targeted social protection system, which is at the heart of one of the coalition government's key development agenda. In this budget, the funding allocation for the Ministry of Women, Children and Social Protection is increased from $147.7 million to $200.2 million, a major increase of $52.5 million. Mr. Speaker, more than 90,000 people on social welfare will directly benefit from an increased monthly allowance of 15 and 25%. For those at the age of 70 years and above and are on the social pension system, will receive a 25% increase. This means that the monthly allowance will increase from $100 a month to $125 a month effective August 2023. Those between the age of 65 to 69 years will have their monthly allowances increased from $100 to $115. As such, Mr. Speaker, the social pension scheme is allocated a large budget of $78.2 million, an increase of $23.2 million to cater for the needs of our 54,200 senior citizens. Mr. Speaker said, the military regime in 2011 unilaterally and illegally reduced the pension rates for many FNPF pensioners and broke the contractual arrangement between the fund and the pensioners. They went even further to pass a law to restrict those pensioners from challenging that in the court of law. It's over a decade, Mr. Speaker, and these pensioners have not received justice. Today we are going to correct this wrong and give some justice to the more than 1,500 pensioners who were put on the reduced pension rates. Effective from August 2023, those 1,500 FNPF pensioners will be able to access the government social pension allowance of $125 if they are above the age of 70 or $115 if they are between 60 to 69 years. FNPF will work together with government to identify and put these pensioners on the social pension scheme on top of what they receive from the current reduced FNPF pensions. This will cost us around $2.2 million per year, Mr. Speaker said, and we are happy to provide that. Protecting our vulnerable children and their childhood will be a key priority for us. In this budget, a sum of $100,000 is allocated to cater for the establishment of a new Department of Children. In addition, a sum of $19.9 million, an increase of $6.2 million, is allocated for child protection allowance. Mr. Speaker, said family assistance, previously known as poverty benefit scheme, is allocated a budget of $45.6 million. This is an increase of $11.5 million from the current financial year and will accommodate the 15% increase across the board. A total of 26,000 households are expected to be assisted with this increased allocation in this financial year. A total sum of $43 million is allocated to cater for disability allowance, bus fare subsidy for elderly and disabled, electricity subsidy to households below 30,000 income, insurance for social welfare recipients. Over 100,000 people are expected to benefit from this. A funding of $500,000 is allocated to the Women's Plan of Action, and a further allocation of $200,000 is provided to support smaller women's organizations for their advocacy work. Mr. Speaker, apart from the funding for the Ministry of Women's Social and Social Protection, to support our ex-servicemen, a sum of $14.9 million is allocated for the Fiji Servicemen's Aftercare Fund to assist 10,226 ex-servicemen and their families, including a 15% increase in their allowances. For over 2,000 government pensioners, a total budget of $37 million is provided, which will also cater for the increase in monthly allowances by 15%. Ethiopia empowerment and development. Mr. Speaker, said the coalition government is determined to empower the Ethiopia and help lift their living standards. For a long time, under the previous government, they did not receive the attention that they should have. We are going to change that. The Ministry of Ethiopia Affairs, Culture, Heritage and Arts has been allocated a budget of $38.6 million, a major increase of $23.2 million from this year's allocation. To strengthen Ethiopia administration and our provincial councils, a grant of $10.8 million is allocated to fund the 14 provincial councils, including $4.3 million to fund the salaries and wages of 182 provincial council officers and the operational expenses of around $6.1 million. We have now reviewed the allowances of the Turangani Koros, Matni Tikinas, and also allocated allowance for Turangani Evusa due to the important role they play in the village administration and leadership. The Turangani Koro monthly allowance will be increased from $100 to $150 per month for all 1,181 Turangani Koros, for which a total sum of $2.1 million is allocated. The Matni Tikina quarterly allowance will be increased by $150 per quarter, which is equivalent to an increase of $50 a month for the 262 matni tikinas. This increase will be on top of the current quarterly allowance for the matni tikina. Currently, the matni tikina is eligible for either $100, $175 or $195 depending on the geographical area they serve, and some are also eligible for certain travel and incidental allowance. A sum of $585,800 is allocated. Mr. Speaker said to recognize and support the Turangani Evusa in decision-making and Banwa administration, a monthly allowance of $100 has been allocated for 648 Turangani Evusas under the Banwa Leadership Allowance with a sum of $0.8 million. To support beautification and general improvement of Itoke village and settlements, Mr. Speaker said we are introducing a village development program with a funding allocation of $2 million. Government will provide 2/3 towards any eligible projects, while villages and settlements will contribute 1/3. The maximum government support will be $10,000 per village per year, and the program will be administered by the Ministry of Itoke Affairs, who will soon finalize the criteria and guidelines. $4 million is allocated for Itoke land development to help landowners with the development of the land for commercial purposes. Previously, this allocation used to be funded under Head 50, but now we've moved this under the administration of the Ministry of Itoke Affairs. The Itoke Affairs Board is allocated a grant of $2.2 million to fund the operations of the board and salary and wage payments of its 79 officers. Improving our health services and infrastructure. Mr. Speaker said the delivery of health services in Fiji has been far from satisfactory, as I said earlier. And in fact, it has been in the state of decay. Over the years, there's been a complete lack of investment in improving the infrastructure of not only the country's largest hospitals, CWM and Lautoka, but all across our health facilities in Fiji, Mr. Speaker. I've said this publicly, and there is no denying that we have never had such bad health services in the independent history of our nation. We are going to give this a highest priority not only in this budget, but also in all our future budgets. It is going to be a difficult task, but we have clearly put our focus on the maintenance of our existing infrastructure and overall improvement in service delivery. The Ministry of Health and Medical Services is allocated a budget of $453.8 million, a significant increase of $58.7 million from this year. Salaries and wages budget for the ministry have increased to $126.4 million, and will cater for 250 intern nurses to move up to become registered nurses, 237 new intern nurses, 46 nursing assistants, 50 nursing aides, 40 midwives, 90 medical laboratory scientists, and additional support staff in various hospitals and non-medical officers for the Fiji pharmaceutical and biomedical services to strengthen capacity and improve procurement efficiency. These additional positions, Mr. Speaker, say, especially the new positions of nursing assistants and nursing aid, will address the current capacity needs with the ministry. The nursing assistant and nursing aid positions have been created to support our nurses' focus on their core role, where these aid and assistants will take over the non-clinical responsibilities like bed making, getting the consumables, and other time-consuming tasks that used to keep the nurses occupied. We are also providing $11.6 million for the upgrade of nurses' salaries and overtime. Mr. Speaker, we are providing over $63 million for public health programs, emergency radiology, laboratory services, procurement of drugs, consumables, medicines, and purchase of biomedical equipment and accessories. Mr. Speaker, we are working together with the Ministry of Health to ensure timely and efficient procurement of the drugs, consumables, and biomedical equipment accessories. A sum of $2.5 million is allocated for kidney dialysis treatment subsidy. The allocation has been increased by $1 million from this year's level to cater for the increase in the dialysis subsidy from the current $150 per session to $180. A sum of $16.4 million is allocated for the upgrade and maintenance of urban hospitals and institutional quarters, permanent walkway for the maternity hospital at CWM, purchase, installation and replacement of ICT equipment, and a major interior upgrade of Lambasa Hospital. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Finance through the Strategic Planning Office will work closely with the Ministry of Health and Public Works to ensure efficient and timely maintenance of our hospitals and health centres, and this has been a major problem, as well as assist in the strengthening of the asset management unit of Ministry of Health. We cannot build new hospitals or health centres if we are not able to maintain what we have right now. Some of the hospitals and health centers do not need large amounts of money to upgrade. Some simply need a few window louvers, replacement of missing tiles, painting, roof repairs, fixing of doors, mosquito netting on windows. We can easily do this. The previous government had tried to expand the coverage of healthcare services through an outsourcing model to engage the service of private general practitioners, dental operators and medical laboratories during the pandemic. And that was a good initiative at that point in time. From 1st August 2023, only patients with a combined household income of 30,000 or less per annum can qualify for the free services at the private practitioners. Reshaping our education sector. Mr. Speaker said the education sector is given the highest allocation in this budget to a tune of $845 million. A lot of haphazard changes and reforms without consultation have caused major problems within the education system. The coalition government, Mr. Speaker, said will relook at the overall education system in a consultative manner, and we have already announced, as you've heard from the Honourable Minister for Education, the appointment of an Education Commission, Education Summit. These forums will take stock of the issues and challenges in the education sector and with proper dialogue and expert guidance chart a way forward for future reforms to lift the standard of education of our children. The world is experiencing another technological revolution, ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, robotics, yet our children and what they currently learn are out of step. Mr. Speaker said the Ministry of Education is allocated a budget of 505.4 million, an increase of 18.4 million. The salaries and wages budget for the ministry has been increased from 318.1 million to 322.6 million to cater for the funding for the more than 14,000 existing teachers and newly established 179 teaching and non-teaching positions at the Ministry of Education. For qualification upgrade and step movement, 8.9 million is allocated for salary upgrade of teachers who have completed relevant qualifications to move to a higher band in line with the teacher remuneration setting policy. For the rural and maritime location allowance, Mr. Speaker, a sum of 5.7 million is allocated, which is an increase of 1.3 million from this year's allocation. Funding provided will cater for location allowances for 3,355 teachers in 921 remote schools. The coalition government is committed to giving free education and transport assistance to our ECE primary and secondary school students with a total funding allocation of more than 100 million. In addition to this, Mr. Speaker, we have again allocated a sum of $45 million to continue back-to-school support of $200 per child for students from early childhood to year 13 for the school year 2024. This will benefit over 230,000 students for families with less than 50,000 household income when they start the school at the beginning of 2024. Mr. Speaker, say a total of $49 million is allocated for overall maintenance and upgrade of schools, including construction of TCS affected school staff quarters in Banwalevu. We thank the Australian government for the generous contribution and for the $30 million towards this project. Technical education and NTPC levy. Mr. Speaker, say the biggest blunder by the previous government was in the areas of technical education. Failed policies which led to the establishment of technical colleges cost the taxpayers more than $20 million. All the technical colleges were left in ruin. We now have a huge responsibility, Mr. Speaker, say, to rebuild our technical education system as well as address the skills gap issue in the country. We are now going to invest in this and work together with existing service providers, including the newly established Pacific Polytech. We are going to revamp the apprenticeship scheme in the next few months and also review the NTPC levy and how best to support and fund skill upgrades in the workforce. The employers have been suffering from this, and the previous government's hasty decision to remove the NTPC levy was a wrong move. Funding for higher education institutions. For higher education, government will continue providing financial support to our tertiary institutions with a total funding allocation of $103.3 million. We have restored the grant for USP and are committed to clearing the outstanding dues, with the first 10 million paid as soon as we came into government. A further 20 million is allocated towards the clearing of USP's outstanding grants, on top of the annual grant of $33.5 million in this budget. In this budget, USP will receive a total funding of $53.5 million. The Fiji National University will be provided a funding grant of $43.4 million. University of Fiji is provided an increased grant of $2.8 million, while the newly established Pacific Polytechnic will receive a funding grant of $1 million. And Sangam Institute of Technology has its grant increased from $114,000 to $614,000, an increase of $500,000 to accommodate additional nursing students in light of the current shortage. Funding is also provided to Corpus Christi, Fulton College, Montfort Technical Institute, Montfort Boys Town, and Vivekananda Technical Center. TELS, forgiveness and scholarships. Mr. Speaker said, now let me move to TELS debt and the forgiveness and the Treasury scholarship funding. Mr. Speaker said, our critics, including the opposition sitting right here, had said that we cannot do this. Mr. Speaker said, as we had promised, I would like to confirm that all outstanding TELS debt is being forgiven by the coalition government. Let me repeat, Mr. Speaker, all TELS debt excluding in-service training to a tune of $650 million owed by 53,725 students who had studied under the TELS scheme is now written off. And none of these 53,725 TELS recipients and their parents and guardians and families will have to pay a single cent back to the government. However, to ensure that these students save the nation and do justice to the taxpayers, as used to be the practice in the past, they will have to save a bond. The bond service will be years of study multiplied by 1.5 for these graduates. Those who choose not to save the bond will have to pay the equivalent cost amount. Moving forward, we will provide all eligible students with scholarships under the rebranded Fijian Scholarship Scheme on merit with a total budget of $148.2 million in this budget. This will cater for the scholarships of 8,720 new students and funding needed for the 9,148 existing students. Eligibility marks will be based on labor market needs and enrollment capacities of the universities and their own criteria. The bonding for new students under the scheme will be years of study multiplied by 1.5 times if tuition only, and years of study multiplied by 2 times if tuition and allowance is paid. In terms of allowances, Mr. Speaker says students under merit-based scholarship will be eligible for $3,400 per semester. Effective from 1st January 2024, all students under scholarships other than merit-based will receive $2,500 per semester if they study at campus away from home, $1,500 for home-based campuses. The full details and eligibility and the selection criteria handbook will be available from TSLS soon. In the next academic year, a new initiative by the coalition government will set aside 3 PhDs and 5 Masters by Research Awards for study at New Zealand universities. The total PhDs and Masters allocation remains 10 and 20 respectively. Fiji Roads Authority. In the last 8 years, a total of around $3.1 billion was spent by Fiji Roads Authority without any strategic plan, Mr. Speaker, without much priority and without proper costing. This, Mr. Speaker, compromised the standard of infrastructure, including roads, and led to significant wastage of public funds. We are going to change the approach towards the planning, construction, and maintenance of our roads. We need to do more with less money. We need to improve the value for money, as there's been a lot of wastage and funding of what I call novelty-type, over-designed, expensive roads in Fiji. The new FRA board is fully in sync with this, and they have been working closely with the government to rethink some of the scoping and design works, rethink about the modalities of awarding road contracts, including closer monitoring and supervision of contractors. There's also a need to open up, and encourage the participation of local contractors through direct contracting for smaller contracts. For the next fiscal year, the Fiji Roads Authority has allocated a budget of $387.6 million, which comprises $14.7 million for operations and $372.9 million for capital expenditures. Mr. Speaker, major emphasis is being placed on the need to ensure adequate maintenance of Fiji's road network, and as such, an increased allocation of $100.6 million is allocated for road maintenance. $42 million for completed maintenance and emergency works. $60 million is provided for the renewal and resurfacing of roads. 35.4 million is allocated for completion of the ongoing bridge projects, 18.3 million for the rural roads, and 13.2 million for the upgrade of Queen Elizabeth Drive, and 82.2 million for the transport infrastructure investment sector project financed through the Asian Development Bank and World Bank loans of US 100 million and US 50 million respectively. Ministry of Works, Meteorological Service and Transport is allocated a sum of 98.3 million. The coalition government, Mr. Speaker, has re-established the Public Works Department to improve the state of rural roads around the country with an initial setup cost of $5 million. Mr. Speaker, the government maintains the commitment towards achieving 100% access to affordable and reliable sources of energy. A sum of 4.1 million is allocated for the completion of 111 grid extension schemes by Energy Fiji Limited. Additionally, the Department of Energy will continue to facilitate house wiring connections for completed grid extension projects with a budget provision of 3 million. For agriculture, Mr. Speaker, we know that it plays an important role towards food security, income generation, employment, rural development, and economic diversification. We want to make agriculture a significant pillar of the diversification of our economy. The Ministry of Agriculture and Waterways, therefore, has been allocated a budget of 95.2 million in this budget, which is a major increase of 37.3 million. We have a Minister for Agriculture, Mr. Speaker, who understands, who has the experience, and I am very confident that with this increased budget, we will see a significant improvement in the productivity within the agriculture sector. A total sum is allocated, total sum of 13.9 million is allocated to fund the Agriculture Marketing Authority, Committee on Better Utilization of Land and Commercial Agriculture Development. 47.5 million is provided for the crops and livestock research and extension services to strengthen agricultural productivity. For the first time, Mr. Speaker, we are providing subsidy, weedicide and fertilizer subsidy for non-sugar crop, such as rice, ginger, dalo and cassava, with a funding of 1 million to boost production of these crops. Dairy industry, Mr. Speaker, was another big disaster and a failure of policy by the previous government, and the dairy industry is on the verge of collapse. 5 million is allocated to Fiji Cooperative Dairy Company Limited and for dairy extension, but there will be a major review of the industry to understand how we can invest more and take the industry forward. 5.3 million is allocated for farm access roads, provision of tractors and existing agriculture offices and quarters. Waterways is allocated a budget of 22.1 million to improve the drainage system around the country, which is also in a very, very bad shape, Mr. Speaker. To improve the drainage schemes, which has been neglected over so many years, a total of 16.2 million is allocated. This will cater for major dredging, coastal erosion protection, watershed management and maintenance of rice irrigation drainage. Mr. Speaker, the government has allocated a sum of 3 million to assist those Fijians whose properties has been damaged, affected by termites in the Western and Northern Division. This is one problem that somehow totally escaped the attention of the previous government. And this problem, Mr. Speaker, is a serious problem now. The Ministry of Finance, so what we've done, Mr. Speaker, is allocated a sum of $3 million to assist those Fijian families whose properties has been damaged, affected by termites in the Western and Northern Division. The Ministry of Finance will release more details on the rollout of this initiative soon. Honourable Tumbona and Honourable Kiran are heading a task force, Mr. Speaker, on looking at how best we can deal with this problem. The Biosecurity Authority of Fiji supports Fiji's agriculture produce exporters by providing information, inspection and certification to meet the import requirements of overseas countries. Moving forward, BAF and Ministry of Agriculture need to work together to create farmer awareness such as farmer outreach activities of the list of agricultural produce under current pathways and market access. Support market access negotiations and retention of such markets and new export pathways are developed and adopted. The Strategic Planning Office within the Ministry of Finance will coordinate this. The Ministry of Multi-Ethnic Affairs and Sugar Industry. Mr. Speaker, the sugar industry is almost, should I say, near collapse. and not much attention was paid by the previous government to revive the industry. Despite all the talk that we had, and despite spending millions of dollars on paying salaries of CEOs and other executive management by the previous government, we have not been able to revamp the industry. The new Sugar Minister, Honourable Singh, is onto the industry in a determined manner. A thorough review and assessment on the industry is required and will be undertaken. The Ministry of Finance, through the Planning Office, will be working with the Ministry of Sugar to begin on a sugar industry strategic plan soon and to find out the flash points, the obstacles that have been there for the industry to be revived once again. The Ministry of Multi-Ethnic Affairs and Sugar Industries allocated a sum of $51.7 million in the new financial year, of which 49.7 is for the sugar unit. With the aim to increase cane production from 1.6 million tons to about 1.9, ideally 2 million tons by 2024, a sum of $11 million is allocated for sugar development and farmers assistance program, new farmers and lease premium assistance, fertilizer and weedicide subsidy, farm incentive programs, and cash beans. Mr. Speaker said we will continue with the guaranteed price of $85 per ton, and this is the first time, Mr. Speaker, that already the full $85 guaranteed price has been paid to the farmers. In fact, more than the guaranteed price, and we still have one payment left per ton with an allocation of about $4 million. Frequent rain and flooding has been one of the major problems faced by the sugar industry and drainage systems in the sugarcane areas and have been neglected or had very minimum maintenance in the last several years. A sum of $5.5 million is allocated for the drainage for sugarcane farms in the next financial year. Mr. Speaker said the ministry is undertaking a thorough review of the responsibilities for multi-ethnic affairs in the area of culture, language, history and arts, and will also be responsible for the Girmit commemorations from next year. A sum of $500,000 is allocated for the preparatory works for guest crematorium for Navua, 2 sites in the Western Division and 1 in the Northern Division. Fisheries and Forestry. Mr. Speaker said the Ministry of Fisheries and Forestry is allocated a budget of $41.6 million. This will support the expansion of aquaculture, shrimp farming, seaweed development program, multi-species hatchery, construction of ice plants, and the supply of tilapia, fingerlings, and prawn fries to farmers in the Western Division. For the reforestation of degraded forest with indigenous and other species, a sum of $2.5 million is allocated. The funding allocated will be used to address challenges and to ensure the survival of trees planted by extensive monitoring, undertaking beat up, enhancing quality seed collection, propagation, and planting protocols. A sum of $2 million is also allocated for the RED Plus and forest emissions reduction program. Ministry of Lands and Mineral Resources is allocated a budget of $30.1 million to enable the ministry to continue effectively and efficiently administer and regulate the land and mineral resource sector. The Honourable Minister, I'm sure, will provide more details on the activities of the ministry, Mr. Speaker said. Ministry of Tourism and Civil Aviation is allocated a sum of $52.3 million in this budget. Tourism Fiji is allocated an operating grant of $7 million, and to support new marketing strategies, an increased marketing grant from the previous allocation of $30 million is provided to the new financial year. The new Minister for Tourism, Honourable DPM Gavoka, is on top of the activities within the tourism industry, Mr. Speaker, and we are confident that under his leadership, the tourism industry will remain a very, very significant part of our economy for the future. Mr. Speaker, a new $200 million World Bank funded Fiji Tourism Development Program in Vanuatu has been approved this week by the World Bank Board. This new project financing of $61.5 million for the first phase is part of a larger $200 million package approved for the 10-year multi-stage tourism program for Vanuatu. A sum of $5 million is allocated in the next financial year for the Ministry of Tourism to support the implementation of the project. The first phase of the program focuses on bolstering tourism in Vanua-Levu, including Tavuni by improving drainage, sewage, transport infrastructure, including upgrade of Lambasa and Sabu domestic airports, as well as an upgrade of the 95-kilometer road connecting the two towns. Ministry of Trade, Cooperatives and Small Medium Enterprises and Communications. The Ministry of Trade and Cooperatives and Small Medium Enterprises Communications is working towards strengthening Fiji's position as an economic and international trade hub of the Pacific, and will focus on strengthening and supporting the growth of micro, small and medium enterprises and cooperatives. And as such, the Ministry has allocated a budget of $116.5 million in the next financial year, an increase of $25.3 million from this year's allocation. A sum of $9 million is allocated to continue with the development and implementation of an online business and construction business licensing system for the ease of doing business and the rollout of the 16 agency ease of doing business processes, which will fully digitize the starting a business and obtaining construction permits processes. Mr. Speaker, a sum of $2.5 million is allocated for the Northern Development Program, National Export Strategy, Integrated Human Resource Development Program, Trade Enhancement Program, and to assist those with trade skills to enhance their business potential. Sports, Mr. Speaker, plays a key role in building social cohesion and improving Fiji's image globally. The Ministry of Youth and Sports is allocated a sum of $19.5 million in the 2023-2024 budget. A sum of $9.7 million is allocated, Mr. Speaker, for overseas sporting tours, including the 2024 Island Pacific Games, Commonwealth Games, the Rugby World Cup, operations of the Fiji National Sports Commission, engagement of sports coaches, hosting international tournaments in Fiji, sports outreach programs, sports scholarship, and sport grant for persons with disability. Ministry of Rural and Maritime Development and Disaster Management. Mr. Speaker, rural and outer island development is one of the top priorities of the coalition government as well. We are committed to bridging the development gap between the rural and urban areas. The Ministry of Rural and Maritime Development and Disaster Management is allocated $29.1 million to support grant to self-help projects, community access roads, footpaths, footbridges projects, rural housing, agent upgrade and renovation of existing divisional quarters. Mr. Speaker, the district advisory councillors and the district chairpersons play an important role, serving as a link between the government and the people at the grassroots and provide development management link between the communities and the government. The advisory councillors' allowance has been reviewed and will be increased from $172.50 to $200 per month for the 302 advisory councillors, whereas monthly allowance for the 16 district chairpersons will be increased from $207 to $220, for which a sum of $770,000 is allocated in the budget. Affordable and decent housing for all. The coalition government's vision is to provide affordable and decent housing for all communities by 2032, and is aimed at supporting families that struggle to find housing due to rising land and house prices. The ministry has allocated a sum of $25.7 million in the budget to support the housing sector. The ministry will continue with the regularization of informal settlements that will provide long-term housing leases to households residing in informal settlements. A budget of $10 million is allocated that will facilitate the commencement of capital works at Sakoda in Nasoni, Nasinu, Tavela in Nandi, Field 4 and Tore in Lotoka, and preparatory works for 9 settlements in Lovo Seaside, Nambare, Dalai Saweni, Lotoka, Walewanguyaya in Ba, Vunika in Lambasa, Dombati in Nasinu, Wanganisila in Nasinu, Sasavira in Nasori, and Nandonomayu in Lemi. To encourage home ownership by assisting eligible recipients to purchase or construct their homes, Mr. Speaker, government will continue to support the first home purchase program with a budget of $5 million to target beneficiaries with a combined household income below $50,000 per annum. A grant of $15,000 is available for the purchase of an existing house or unit, and $30,000 is provided to build a new house or unit. For beneficiaries with a combined income of 50,000 to 100,000, the government has allocated a budget of 1.5 million to support first-time home ownership with a grant of 5,000. If they buy an existing house or unit, 20,000 to build a new house or unit will be provided. For the public-private partnership affordable housing project, a sum of $2 million is allocated for the preparatory works. The PPP project will steadily realize the government's vision to provide over 3,200 affordable high-quality housing units for Fijian families. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, this project, the preparatory works was started by the previous government. The project is reshaping the housing sector and will build a new housing market where more ordinary families can afford to own a home, own a strata title, or rent properties at affordable rates. We are currently working with IFC to finalize the bidding documents for the tender, which is expected to be advertised by August 2023. We have also discussed this with the banks, and they are eager to participate in supporting the government with this project by making finance eligible to strata title owners based on their own criteria. Mr. Speaker, we are also being informed that a few of the banks have now launched a new product, at least one bank, that has provided me in written to provide credit for agreement to lease properties and associated costs for surveying, registration and conveyancing fees. This will be a major change by the banks, Mr. Speaker, where they will provide loans for people who will just agreement to lease so that they can develop, have it surveyed and get a proper title. This will be an added boost to the formalization of housing in informal settlements. Ministry of Local Government is allocated a sum of 29.3 million in this budget. The coalition government, Mr. Speaker, has already announced that all towns and city councils will now have elected councillors, and I am pleased to announce that the ministry and the government is firmly focused on facilitating council elections next year. A sum of 3.9 million is allocated for the new Sabu market, around $1 million for the new Nakasi market, 100,000 for the preparatory works for the Duketi mini market, 1.3 million for the completion of Lubuka market, 3.5 million for the completion of Govind Park, and $4.6 million for the completion of Lotoka swimming pool. Again, Mr. Speaker, both Govind Park and Lotoka swimming pool projects were badly managed, and it was turning out to be a disaster. Government is now left with no option but to provide additional funding to complete these projects with increased cost. We will ensure that the project gets completed in the new financial year, and a review will be undertaken by the Ministry of Finance to look at how the projects were implemented, value for money assessment, and the reasons for the failure of the projects. Mr. Speaker, to support our DRUA team, we are allocating $1 million for procurement of enhanced equipment and services required to deliver internationally quality broadcast required for DRUA's participation in Super Rugby and other international matches. The Ministry of Finance has provided a total budget of 89.5 million, including an increased grant of 45.5 million to the Fiji Revenue and Customs Service. The Ministry of Finance, Mr. Speaker, is modernizing its systems and processes and has embarked on a significant IT project to replace the current financial management information system, which is almost 20 years old. Under this project, the payroll system, which again is a major risk for government and the Ministry of Finance, will also be replaced and integrated with the FEMIS. We thank the Asian Development Bank for the invaluable technical support in this transition. A sum of 14 million is allocated for the new system. Apart from this, 2 million is allocated to complete the implementation of a new budget software system. At the moment, Mr. Speaker, at this day and age, most of the things in terms of budget preparation is done manually. Mr. Speaker, the re-establishment of the Strategic Planning Office will ensure better coordination and formulation of a strategic and robust development agenda. The Strategic Planning Office, in fact, previously, Mr. Speaker, we always used to have a dedicated Ministry of National Planning. This Strategic Planning Office will help formulate a new national development plan, strengthen the policy and planning within government, improve coordination among ministries and departments, appraisal and selection of public investment projects, monitoring and evaluation of projects, improve coordination of development projects across government, and strengthen national workforce planning and economic intelligence analysis. A sum of 3.4 million is allocated for the operations of the office. The coalition government is working towards strengthening the Fiji Bureau of Statistics with a review of the Statistics Act to give them more autonomy and to ensure that the Statistics Office is well equipped to provide timely and reliable statistics, including providing ethnic data as well. A budget of 7.6 million is provided to the Bureau, which includes $2.4 million to cover the cost of the 2023-2024 employment and National Employment and Unemployment Survey. Mr. Speaker said $36 million is provided for vehicle leasing, which is under comprehensive review to determine the cost-effective way forward for government to acquire the fleet and its management. Civil service is allocated a sum of 50.6 million in the next financial year. An establishment of support unit in the Ministry of Civil Service to ensure decisions on the management of the ministry establishment are transparent, accountable, and consistent with good principles. In addition to this, a shared services agreement policy will be developed in consultation with the Ministry of Finance and implemented to ensure that where possible, ministries and departments are efficiently utilizing existing human resources across the common cadres. This will contribute to easier transfers of the staff between ministries, allowing for the sharing of knowledge and information in the civil service. This used to be done very effectively and efficiently in the past, Mr. Speaker said. For office space rental, a sum of 34.5 million is allocated to facilitate the monthly rentals to landlords for the properties leased by various ministry departments. $3 million is allocated for the renovation and maintenance of government quarters and public buildings in this project. Ministry of Home Affairs and Immigration is allocated a budget of 12.4 million. The ministry will undertake a holistic national security defense review, including development of a security strategy and associated legislative reforms to strengthen national security. The Immigration Department services have to be improved significantly to build capabilities in addressing immigration-related crimes, including human trafficking, streamlining processes to support the private sector and improve the daily experiences of our citizens. The Immigration Office, Mr. Speaker says, provided with additional 23 new positions to ensure that the service delivery is improved. For the digitization and modernization of immigration systems and processes, a funding support of 1.1 million is provided through the Australian government as well. A sum of 1.5 million is allocated for procurement of passports, while 300,000 is allocated for the installation of e-passport kits in immigration offices and overseas missions. Fiji continues to maintain its foreign relations with more than 182 countries, Mr. Speaker. Under the leadership of the Honourable Prime Minister, there has been renewed interest and engagement and sense of optimism and enthusiasm from our regional and international partners. We need to continue enhancing foreign relations, promoting Fiji's foreign policy initiatives, advancing Fiji's leadership in the global arena, improving trade performance, and maintaining Fiji as a modern hub of the Pacific. To further enhance our diplomatic and international relations, the Speaker said the sum of $4 million is allocated for the startup cost associated with the reopening of Fiji overseas missions in Washington, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and setup of a new embassy in Israel. 2.2 million is allocated for the refurbishment of overseas missions. The Office of the Honourable Prime Minister is provided with a budget of 50.8 million, and this funding will also cater for the Climate Change Division of Department of Environment, Department of Information, National Archives of Fiji, and Public Enterprises. Office of the Attorney General. The coalition government, Mr. Speaker, has re-established the Fiji Law Reform Commission, which has not been fully functional since 2006 and currently operates as part of the Legal Drafting Division or Department in the Solicitor General's Office. The Commission was initially established by legislation in 1979 under the Fiji Law Reform Commission Act. The Commission will used to undertake systematic review, reforms and development of laws to make them simple, modern and relevant. Plus, Mr. Speaker, the Fiji Law Reform Commission had the expertise to consult widely and to advise government on good laws So we have allocated a sum of 400,000 in this budget for that. Independent bodies, the government, Mr. Speaker, is assisting the review of the Audit Act to strengthen the office of the Auditor General and make it more independent. A sum of 7 million is provided to the Office of the Auditor General in this budget. To fast-track the audit backlog, which has been an issue over the years, the Auditor General is provided a new allocation of 722,000 for outsourcing some of its audits so that we can bring up to speed, Mr. Speaker, all the outstanding audits that need to be done. An independent and well-resourced judiciary is critical for a well-functioning democracy and a good economy. A sum of 50 million is provided towards the funding of our judiciary in this budget. The Fijian Parliament is allocated a sum of 16.3 million, an increase of 7.7 million. This includes 4.4 million for the purchase of equipment and upgrade of the broadcast system, which will include a multi-language captioning to enable our Parliament to be more inclusive and increase citizen engagement in our 3 key languages. A total sum of 35.5 million is allocated to independent commissions, and we are now strengthening and tightening the processes and reporting mechanisms for the independent bodies, commissions and statutory authorities. Over the years, there has been serious lack of timely submission of annual reports, detailed expenditure breakdowns and utilization reports by many of these institutions. This is not the standard of proper accountability that we expect of independent bodies, and we hope that with appropriate allocation of budget, this will improve. The Ministry of Justice has been allocated a sum of 5.1 million. The availability of timely and efficient access to justice, Mr. Speaker, says is critical to social and economic development. And to support access to justice, the Ministry will be undertaking digitization works in consultation with the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Communications and other relevant key stakeholders on its legal registries, and upon the completion of the digitization, most of the services will be provided online. This will improve efficiency and administration of justice. The Office of the Registrar of Titles is being allocated 13 additional positions to improve service delivery and meet increased customer demand for the services. This, Mr. Speaker, has been a constant source of complaint from the business community as well. The Correction Service is allocated a sum of $47 million. 30 new positions with an allocation of 550,000 is funded in the new financial year. 4.2 million is allocated to cater for food rations for inmates occupied in penal institutions and from the rehabilitation and Yellow Ribbon program to support the rehabilitation program for the inmates. $4.7 million, Mr. Speaker, says is also allocated for the commencement of the construction of new supervisor's office at Lambasa Correction Centre, Phase 2 upgrade works for Nasinu Cemetery and Phase 4 works for Suba Cemetery, construction of retaining wall at Labuka Correction Centre, construction of boundary fence for Nasini Correction Centre and boundary fence for Suba Women's Correction Centre, and upgrade and maintenance of institutional buildings and repair and maintenance of institutional quarters. Fiji Police Force has been allocated a sum of 183.7 million. The force, Mr. Speaker, is increasingly focused on preventing cyber crimes and combating the distribution and use of illegal drugs. The force will receive an additional 100 police constables to boost its operations, for which a sum of $2.3 million is allocated in the budget. To improve police visibility, 700,000 is allocated to strengthen what we call the police beat patrol in both urban and rural areas. This is a new initiative for crime prevention, Mr. Speaker said. Over the years, Mr. Speaker said, the previous government had constructed new police stations which has cost close to $100 million, while many existing police stations, quarters and posts were neglected. With a focus on maintenance and bringing our infrastructure to a better standard, $3 million is allocated for the renovation and upgrade of police quarters and posts. We also acknowledge the important role that the Republic of Fiji military forces plays in maintaining the security, defense and supporting peace efforts around the world. In this budget, the RFMF is allocated a sum of $103.1 million. Let me, Mr. Speaker, now cover some ground before I finish on future economic policy measures, particularly in the area of economic growth. We came into office 6 months ago into an economic environment which might best be called a policy-free zone. The budgeting and economic policy sphere was secret. Nobody except some people knew what was happening or what was planned. Criticism of government policy was silent. Many people with an interest in contributing to economic policy had simply given up. Every national budget was anxiously awaited, with no one knowing what surprises would come. Mr. Speaker, in the coalition government, we have tried to be different. We and our advisors have been open about our thinking. Our Honourable Prime Minister has been open about our thinking. Our ministers, our Deputy Prime Ministers have been open about our thinking. We have put our thoughts into the public space. We have learned from the criticism and feedback we received, including those from the opposition. We've shared our economic decision-making with the public. I have talked about this many times in opposition. Over the last 10 years, Fiji has slumped badly on all indicators of the ease of doing business. But instead of listening to the concerns of investors, the previous government just blamed everybody else for the bad numbers. So what we will do differently? Everybody talks about improving the business environment. Sooner or later, we have to get down to some key issues and processes. What are these? Let us first look at the issues that we want to build and invest, and that is physical capital. Foreign investors wanting to acquire or even lease relatively small areas of land are already frustrated by the slow processing of applications under the Land Sales Act. We need to look at the processes under the State Lands Act, which prevent us from leasing government land effectively for economic purposes. This includes foreshore leases, which are often critical for tourism and similar activities. We will be carefully reviewing processes in both the Department of Environment and the Department of Town and Country Planning, which interacts with local governments on town planning issues. These are the critical agencies to ensure that we process building and development applications in an orderly and planned way. The processes are bureaucratic and need simplification. We will soon be setting up a working group to advance this process. We have a lot of complaints from developers about access to electricity. So we'll be zeroing in on this to identify where the problems are and develop solutions. On the supply side of energy, Fiji is well off its targets for renewable energy development. We need urgently to ramp up our renewable energy generating capacity. We need to get the right stakeholders together, the renewable suppliers, EFL, the FCCC, and others to act on this urgently. We also need to address the needs of businesses in their daily operations. At this point, we are focused on 3 issues. As we battle the loss of skills to overseas countries, we have continued to complicate life for local businesses needing to import skills, both short and long term. This includes the Immigration Department, where we believe that we can spend a lot more money, a little bit more money on personnel and systems to make the work permit process work more efficiently. We believe there is scope to increase fees charged by the department, and the economic payback for government can be very good. We have already taken some steps to ease the pressure on the grant of short-term work permits. We'll also look at wider immigration law reforms which will align Fiji in the global economy and which will take advantage of the increasing mobility of people and economic capital. And again, Mr. Speaker, we will be setting up another working group on this. We know that many businesses, large and small, are frustrated by the time it takes them to get routine offshore payments through the exchange control and tax clearance processes between the Reserve Bank of Fiji and FRCS, RBF. These 2 entities must work together to ensure that there is more flexibility in the processes that are there. Businesses of all sizes complain repeatedly about the time and bureaucracy involved in simple periodic regulatory processes such as the National Fire Authority, occupational health and safety checks, liquor licensing, health inspections. And I am pleased to say that the Ministry of Trade, under the leadership of the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister Kamkamida, is already working on this, and an IFC-supported project is now in progress to reform this process. And I think that will produce some significant results. These are, Mr. Speaker, some of the few initiatives on which we are working on, and these are the ones to which different ministries will give priority in the next 6 months in partnership with other stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, I realize I have been almost 2 hours on my feet monopolizing your attention. I can only thank you for all your patience. In closing, I think we can all agree that this is a tough but a fair budget. Absolutely fair budget. A balanced budget. We have tried to look after everybody within the tight financial resources and fiscal constraints. The road ahead will not be easy, but we are hopeful that what we have laid down in this budget today will be a strong foundation for future recovery, growth and prosperity. I have laid out, Mr. Speaker, how we intend to raise revenue, despite our grave economic woes, by instituting fiscal restraint and discipline. I have also laid down measures that will address the challenges of rising cost of living and social protection provisions for our most vulnerable. In addition, with this budget, we can start climbing out of our cycle of debt if we stay on course with this pathway and stay disciplined. From a debt to GDP ratio of almost 90% in the July 2022 fiscal year, we want to drop that to 79% debt to GDP ratio by July 2024 and sink that further down, Mr. Speaker, to under 60% by 2030. Once we get down to under 60% debt to GDP ratio, only then can we have more space for actual progressive spending. Honourable Speaker, with the concurrence of the Cabinet, I commend this budget to this august House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Secretary General.
A bill to appropriate a sum of $3,761,979,404 for the ordinary services of government for the year ending 31 July 2024, Bill number 3 of 2023.
Honourable members, in accordance with Standing Orders 84, Clause 1, the 2023 to 2024 Appropriation Bill 2023 has now been read for the first time. In accordance with Standing Orders 99, Clause 3, the bill will now be listed on the order paper for the second reading on Monday, the 10th of July, 2023. Secretary General.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance and Strategic Planning, National Development and Statistics, to move consequential bills under Standing Order 51.
I now call upon the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance and Strategic Planning, National Development and Statistics, the Honourable Professor Biman Prasad, to move his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 51, I move that the following consequential bills for the 2023-2024 national budget be considered by Parliament without delay. 1. Tax Administration Budget Amendment Bill 23. 2. Income Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2023. 3. Value-Added Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2023. 4. Customs Budget Amendment Bill 2023. 5. Customs Tariff Budget Amendment Bill 2023. Excise Budget Amendment Bill 2023. Airport Departure Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2023. Water Resource Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2023. Fiji Revenue and Customs Service Budget Amendment Bill 2023. Fiji National Provident Fund Budget Amendment Bill 2023. Treasury Scholarships and Loan Service Budget Amendment Bill 2023. And 12. Land Sales Budget Amendment Bill 2023. Mr. Speaker, say pursuant to Standing Order 51, I move that the consequential bills A must pass through one stage at a single sitting of Parliament, B must not be referred to a standing committee or other committees of Parliament, C must be debated and voted upon by Parliament immediately after the vote on the 2023-2024 Appropriation Bill 2023, and that 1 hour be given to debate the consequential bills tabled today and be voted upon in the sitting of Parliament beginning on Monday, 10th July 2023.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Mr. Speaker, I second the motion.
Honourable members, the floor is now open for debate on the motion. And I now call on the Deputy Prime Minister. And before I do that, are there any speakers on the motion? No. Thank you. And I now call on the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and Strategic Planning, National Development and Statistics, the Honourable Professor Biman Prasad, to speak in reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have nothing much to add except to say thank you to the opposition for understanding that all these bills are consequential bills. They give effect to the budget. And I presented it today to ensure that the honourable opposition members have enough time. Essentially, you'll have about 2 weeks to go through all these bills, and so we could have a good debate. Thank you, and that's all I have from my side. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Honourable members, Parliament will now vote, and the question is, pursuant to Standing Orders 51, that the following consequential bills for 2023-2024 national budget to be considered by Parliament without delay. 1. Tax Administration, which is the Budget Amendment Bill 2023 and Bill number 4 of 2023. 2. Income Tax Budget Amendment Bill 2023 and the Bill number 5 of 2023. 3. Value-added tax, and this is Bill number 6 of 2023. The Customs Budget Amendment Bill 2023, which is Bill number 7 of 2023. 5. The Customs Tariff Budget Amendment Bill, which is Bill number 8 of 2023. The Excise Budget Amendment Bill, which is Bill number 9 of 2023. The Airport Departure Tax, this is Bill number 10 of 2023. Water Resource Tax, which is Budget Amendment Bill number 23, Bill number 11 of 2023. And 9, the Fiji Revenue and Customs Service, which is Bill number 12 of 2023. 10, the National Provident Fund Budget Amendment Bill, which is Bill number 13 of 2023. And 11, the Tertiary Scholarships and Loan Service Budget Amendment Bill, which is Bill number 14 of 2023. And the Land Sales Budget Amendment Bill, which is Bill number 15 of 2023. And then, pursuant to Standing Orders 51, the consequential bills must pass through one stage at a single sitting of Parliament, must not be referred to a standing committee or other committees of Parliament, and must be debated and voted upon by Parliament immediately after the vote on 2023-2024 Appropriation Bill, and that finally that 1 hour be given for debate on the consequential bills tabled today and be voted upon in the sitting beginning on Monday the 10th of 2023. Does any member oppose the motion? No. As no member opposes the motion is agreed to unanimously. Honorable members and friends and members of the public at the gallery, I now intend to adjourn the House for some morning refreshment and tea perhaps. It's almost 12. But again, and then we will recall Parliament at the sound of the bell. The House is now adjourned.